The thick, humid air of the ancient Indus Valley once held the secret to human endurance, a profound understanding of biological rhythms that modern society has violently abandoned. Today, millions of people drag themselves from their beds before dawn carrying a heavy, unexplained exhaustion that feels less like standard tiredness and more like a creeping systemic sickness. We walk under harsh fluorescent lights emitting unnatural blue frequencies, breathe mechanically filtered air, and stare at glowing screens, completely ignoring the deeply rooted circadian cycles that once kept our ancestors thriving. This chronic fatigue is not a personal failure, but the symptom of a massive epidemic where the human nervous system is silently breaking down under the crushing weight of modern industrial life. This invisible drain on our cellular energy reveals a critically broken system, one where we have forgotten how to simply exist as living creatures operating within a natural world. Recent epidemiological studies show that over 70% of modern adults suffer from chronic sleep deficits, a staggering statistic that points to a fundamental biological mismatch between our bodies and our current environment. The severing of our connection to the earth did not happen overnight, but through a slow, deliberate series of modern conveniences that turned into invisible change. During the Industrial Revolution, we traded the quiet, fading light of sunset for bright incandescent bulbs that blast our retinas with thousands of lux, tricking our brains into endless daylight and pushing our fragile bodies far past their natural limits. Late nights spent chasing endless digital tasks, and the frantic rushing from one artificial climate-controlled room to the next slowly erased our internal biological clocks. We stopped listening to the subtle chemical signals of hunger, rest, and waking, effectively cutting the vital neurological cord that once tied our physical health, our melatonin production, and our digestion directly to the turning of the planet. Stripped of these ancient grounding rhythms, the human body is left to navigate a chaotic and demanding world without its most basic evolutionary survival compass. Without the sun to dictate our hormonal shifts, our cortisol levels remain artificially elevated late into the evening, leaving our adrenal glands constantly depleted and our immune systems dangerously vulnerable to everyday pathogens. Yet thousands of years ago, wise observers in the Indian subcontinent recognized the danger of losing this connection and left behind a detailed map for human survival. These early healers meticulously watched the movements of the sun, the changing of the agricultural seasons, and the behavior of local wildlife, realizing that human life was deeply fragile if pulled away from nature's strict, unforgiving timeline. They recorded their clinical findings into massive, intricate manuals designed to protect the mind and body from premature decay, a profound gift of medical wisdom that modern society has almost entirely ignored. The true tragedy lies in how easily we discarded this ancient blueprint, trading a life of balanced, natural health for a desperate cycle of chronic inflammation, metabolic dysfunction, and temporary pharmaceutical cures. These forgotten Sanskrit texts still sit in quiet library archives across the globe, holding the exact instructions we need to stop our slow daily self-destruction. Translated volumes like the Charaka Samhita contain thousands of verses detailing preventative medicine, offering a stark contrast to our modern medical system that waits until a patient is actively suffering before offering any meaningful intervention. To understand the depth of this historical loss, you only need to look at your own rushed morning routine as if it were the dark scene of a biological crime. The skipped breakfast, the sudden jolt of highly acidic dark coffee on an empty stomach, and the frantic sprint out the door are all pieces of evidence pointing to a daily, calculated assault on your own central nervous system. We brush off the resulting midday brain fog, the sudden afternoon energy crashes, and the lingering joint aches as just normal, acceptable parts of working hard in a competitive economy. But an investigator of ancient medicine would look at these exact modern habits and see a clear, undeniable pattern of self-inflicted harm, slowly poisoning the digestive tract and degrading the body day by day. Every ignored symptom, every suppressed fever, and every skipped meal leaves a physical mark on our cellular memory, building a silent, compounding case against the very way we choose to live. Over decades, these minor daily infractions accumulate into major systemic failures, manifesting as autoimmune disorders, severe cardiovascular disease, and a total collapse of the body's natural resilience. The chilling truth hidden within these ancient records is that lasting well-being cannot be isolated in a modern laboratory or bought over the counter in a plastic bottle. The ancient science of Ayurveda was never just about mixing exotic herbs or aggressively treating a localized disease after it had already taken deep root in the flesh and bone of the patient. It was a strict, preventative, life-saving system built entirely on the relentless, uncompromising discipline of daily actions. These ancient doctors explicitly warned their students that waiting until a patient was visibly sick to seek health was exactly like waiting to dig a well, only when your house was already burning to the ground. A fatal error in basic survival logic. This fundamental shift in medical thinking reveals that our modern reliance on quick surgical fixes and emergency room interventions is not just heavily flawed, but dangerously backward. By ignoring the daily maintenance of the human machine, we have created a society that survives longer through artificial means, but lives sicker, plagued by preventable ailments that ancient physicians learned to avoid centuries ago. At the very heart of this ancient defense system is a foundational concept known as Dinacharya, a Sanskrit term which translates simply to daily routine, but to the early, pioneering healers of Ayurveda, this was no casual suggestion, no modern wellness trend or optional lifestyle choice to be casually tried on the weekends when extra time allowed. Dinacharya was designed as a precise, step-by-step daily armor, a sequence of specific actions meant to protect the human body from the crushing physical and mental stress of existence. From the exact 90 minutes before sunrise, known as Brahma Muhurta, to the specific way one cleanses the tongue and skin, every single rule was engineered to lock human biology back into the indestructible rhythm of the earth. By following this strict daily shield, a person could effectively optimize their digestion, stabilize their nervous system, and block the slow creep of disease before it ever had a chance to enter the blood. This was not magic, but a highly observant science of survival, proving that the mundane habits of our mornings hold the absolute power to dictate the length and quality of our lives. The modern 21st century world operates under a brutal, systemic illusion, driven by a relentless economic demand to push past the setting sun and ignore the heavy, chemical pull of exhaustion. Millions of shift workers and office employees drag themselves through the dark hours, forcing their endocrine systems to stay alert under harsh artificial blue lights when their cellular biology is actively screaming for restorative rest. This creates a quiet internal war where the human body is constantly fighting a losing battle against the rotation of the earth itself. We force heavy processed meals down our throats at midnight, demanding our dormant digestive organs to suddenly secrete acids and enzymes to break down dense food they are completely unprepared to handle during their natural repair cycles. This daily, normalized violence against our natural circadian rhythm slowly breaks down our internal immune defenses and critical metabolic pathways. The resulting biological disruption leaves modern populations highly vulnerable to a creeping systemic exhaustion and chronic cellular inflammation that absolutely no amount of weekend sleep can ever successfully cure. More than 3,000 years ago in the Indus Valley, careful observers watching this human struggle realized that treating every person with the exact same medical routine was a fatal, destructive mistake. Through meticulous documentation, they uncovered the existence of Prakriti, a deeply hidden, entirely unique genetic and physical blueprint locked inside every single individual from the exact moment of their birth. These early physicians saw that a specific herbal compound or dietary shift that healed one person could easily trigger a severe allergic reaction in another, because no two bodies reacted to the environment in the exact same way. This profound realization meant that true baseline health was never a standardized, one-size-fits-all formula, but a highly personal, complex code waiting to be deciphered by a trained eye. Understanding this hidden human blueprint became the very foundation of biological survival in a harsh, ancient landscape. This paradigm shift completely changed how early Ayurvedic healers approached every single illness, transforming their methods from blind trial and error into a highly calculated, individualized system of preventative care and targeted medical intervention. This raises a chilling question that still haunts modern clinical science today. How did people in ancient India map the complex inner workings of the human body without a single microscope, blood test, or magnetic resonance imaging machine? They possessed no advanced technology, yet texts like the Charaka Samhita mapped the intricate pathways of digestion, blood flow, and nervous system responses with a terrifying, almost impossible accuracy. Their only diagnostic tools were relentless patience and an unsettling, razor-sharp ability to observe the unseen forces of nature, mirroring themselves directly inside the human frame. They watched the shifting temperatures of changing seasons, the fluid dynamics of rivers, and the friction of the wind, recognizing those exact same raw physical elements silently driving the mechanical functions of human organs and cellular tissues. This intense methodical observation allowed these early practitioners to track nearly invisible shifts in a patient's radial pulse, skin temperature, and eye coloration. By reading these subtle biomarkers, they became capable of detecting deadly physiological imbalances and systemic infections months before any recognizable physical pain or catastrophic organ failure finally appeared. From this deep clinical observation emerged the chilling discovery of the doshas, three invisible, powerful forces named Vata, Pitta, and Kapha that silently dictate our ultimate physical and mental fate. These are not abstract, mystical concepts, but very real biological energies representing kinetic movement, metabolic transformation, and physical structure within our living flesh and bone. Vata acts like the wind, governing the central nervous system and controlling every tiny movement, from the rapid blinking of an eye to the electrical beating of a human heart. Pitta operates like a hidden fire, managing gastrointestinal digestion, hormone production, and the sharp cognitive focus of the mind, while Kapha provides the heavy, grounding structural integrity that lubricates joints and binds our skeletal muscles together. Every single human being holds a completely unique, genetically determined baseline mixture of these three invisible forces from the exact moment of conception. Maintaining this delicate internal ratio and keeping these specific metabolic energies perfectly stable is quite literally the only biological barrier standing between a long, functional health span and total, catastrophic physical collapse. The shocking reality of this ancient system sets in when these delicate doshas are violently knocked out of balance by our modern destructive lifestyle habits. A sudden drop in barometric pressure, a skipped midday meal, or a single week of intense workplace stress acts like a lit match dropped in dry brush, causing these once stable internal forces to rapidly go rogue. What begins as a tiny, entirely unnoticed chemical imbalance quickly escalates into a chilling, unstoppable descent into chronic illness. An overheated pitta response turns a minor daily frustration into a burning, uncontrollable psychological anger, while a severely disturbed vata scatters the fragile nervous system, leaving the entire body physically trembling, unable to sleep, and deeply exhausted. Once these rogue biological energies accumulate and violently spill over their natural physiological boundaries, they aggressively flood the body's weakest anatomical points without warning. This silent, destructive internal migration breaks down local tissue immunity, perfectly setting the stage for severe autoimmune disorders, unexpected cardiovascular failures, and degenerative chronic diseases to permanently take root. The resulting physical damage is undeniably devastating, but the true horror lies in the profound mental anguish of living with a fundamentally broken neurochemical balance. It is the terrifying, gripping surge of cortisol and anxiety that suddenly jolts you awake at 3 a.m, leaving your heart racing in the dark for absolutely no logical reason. It is the heavy, suffocating, dark, depressive fog that settles over a human mind completely out of sync with its own evolutionary biology, making even the simplest daily tasks feel like climbing a treacherous mountain. You become a helpless prisoner in your own head, trapped by violent emotional storms that are actually just desperate biological cries for help from a central nervous system pushed entirely too far. This quiet, invisible mental torture is the ultimate, unavoidable consequence of arrogantly ignoring our natural circadian rhythms and ancestral routines. It serves as a grim, undeniable historical reminder that modern medicine can never safely separate the psychological health of our fragile minds from the raw, elemental biology driving the physical machinery of our body. To stop this internal collapse, ancient observers documented in the Charaka Samhita around 200 BCE, designed a strict protocol known as Dinacharya, a daily routine that functions as an inescapable trap for biological chaos. They realized that the body's invisible forces, the fundamental energies called doshas, thrive on unpredictability, turning wild and destructive when left without rigid environmental boundaries to contain them. By forcing the body to wake, eat, and wash at the exact same moments every single day, this routine acts as a powerful, non-negotiable reset button for the entire nervous system. It forces erratic internal energies and fluctuating hormone levels to submit to a predictable circadian rhythm, slowly taming the rogue metabolic elements before they can cause lasting cellular harm. The rising sun over the ancient riverbanks of the Indus Valley marked not just the start of a day, but the locking of a biological cage around the body's darkest, most chaotic physiological impulses. This was a calculated synchronization, anchoring the fragile human organism to the inescapable mechanical rotation of the planet to prevent the mind from unraveling into disorder. This daily capture of chaos begins in the unsettling stillness of Brahma Muhurta, the dark, quiet hours occurring precisely between 4:24 and 5:12 in the morning. There is a profound, almost eerie isolation in waking while the rest of the world remains unconscious, a solitary confrontation with the naked self in the dead of night, when the atmospheric pressure is at its absolute lowest. Ancient texts like the Sushruta Samhita insisted that stepping into this heavy, silent darkness was the most critical action a person could take for their long-term survival. It was in this cold, undisturbed window that the mind was believed to be most vulnerable to objective truth, stripped of the daily sensory noise that so easily masks our deepest physical and mental fractures. Leaving the warmth of sleep exactly 96 minutes before sunrise was the non-negotiable first step in diagnosing the body's true condition before the demands of the day altered its baseline. In this precise window, ancient physicians taught that a person could feel the unvarnished reality of their own pulse, identifying hidden joint stiffness and silent inflammation before they escalated into visible disease. Ignoring this dark window and sleeping past sunrise triggers a chilling biological consequence that modern chronobiology is only just beginning to understand. As the sun climbs higher after 6 o'clock in the morning, the environment shifts from light and clear to heavy and solid, and a sleeping body absorbs that exact same dense, lethargic energy into its own muscle tissues and bloodstream. This late waking traps stagnant, heavy forces deep inside the biological tissues, effectively suffocating the mind in a state known today as severe sleep inertia. The result is a creeping, suffocating brain fog and a persistent physical sluggishness driven by an impaired cortisol awakening response, creating a neurological deficit that no amount of synthetic caffeine can ever truly clear away. Sleeping through the dawn does not grant the body more restorative rest, but instead locks a heavy, invisible weight around the neck of the waking mind. By missing the critical hormonal transition of the early morning, the delayed sleeper fractures their entire 24-hour endocrine cycle, ensuring that every subsequent biological process throughout the day operates under a measurable, exhausting handicap. In the ancient world, this early waking was a slow, deliberate surfacing guided by the subtle shifts in thermal temperature and the first quiet sounds of the surrounding forest ecosystem. Today, that gentle neurological transition has been entirely erased by the violent, jarring shock of the modern smartphone alarm clock, which bypasses all natural arousal stages to force immediate consciousness. A sudden blaring digital noise tears through the darkness, ripping the brain from deep delta wave sleep with the force of a physical blow to the head. This artificial scream floods the dark bedroom with stress hormones, causing a massive spike in adrenaline and throwing the sympathetic nervous system into a state of sheer, unadulterated panic before the eyes even open. This violent daily jolt instantly shatters the delicate internal balance, starting the morning not with a synchronized biological reset, but with a traumatic, heart-racing alarm. Over time, these chronic morning adrenaline spikes lead to severe adrenal fatigue and systemic inflammation, fundamentally destroying the predictable circadian rhythm that the ancient Dinacharya protocol explicitly sought to protect and preserve at all costs. Once awake, the routine demands immediate attention to the first and most urgent physical ritual, the total and complete elimination of digestive waste. While we sleep, the body acts as a desperate cleaning crew, with the liver and kidneys working through the night to sweep dangerous, discarded cellular materials away from our vital organs and push them toward the lower exits. If these biological exits are not cleared immediately upon waking, the entire internal cleanup operation catastrophically fails. The gathered metabolic waste simply sits in the colon, where the large intestine begins drawing water back into the bloodstream, carrying dissolved endotoxins and poisonous byproducts straight back into the very vascular systems that worked so incredibly hard to expel them in the dark. Holding on to this physical refuse for even a few extra hours turns the human body into a highly toxic holding cell. Ancient physicians documented how this delayed evacuation manifests instantly in the body, producing foul breath, a thick coating on the tongue, and sudden joint inflammation, proving that the trapped waste is actively degrading the surrounding tissues minute by minute. This failure to clear the night's debris leads to the most shocking ancient discovery of all, the dangerous accumulation of ama. This is not a philosophical myth, but a very real, sticky, toxic residue equivalent to oxidized lipids and advanced glycation end products that builds up overnight, coating the internal gastrointestinal channels and arterial walls like a slow-acting, suffocating poison. Knowing that this foul, pathogenic substance is growing inside you is a deeply unsettling biological reality. It is the grim, physical manifestation of unresolved psychological stress, poor dietary choices, and broken digestion, forming a dangerous biofilm that blocks nutrient absorption and silently chokes the life out of the body, from the inside out, while harboring colonies of harmful, disease-causing bacteria. This invisible sludge becomes the root of all modern disease, a quiet killer, born entirely from our stubborn refusal to follow the strict morning rules of our ancestors. By allowing this toxic residue to fester and spread through the bloodstream, we trigger the systemic inflammation, autoimmune disorders, and cardiovascular blockages that define today's chronic illness epidemic, entirely by our own making. To combat this creeping decay, ancient healers operating in the Indus Valley around 1500 BCE forged a very specific weapon, a simple piece of curved copper or silver known as a tongue scraper. This was not a tool for vanity, but a necessary surgical instrument designed to physically drag the toxic residue out of the body before it could do further systemic harm. The physical process was deliberate and unyielding, requiring a person to reach far back toward the gag reflex and pull forward, scraping away the thick white film of dead cells and volatile sulfur compounds that had gathered in the dark hours of the night. Every heavy stroke across the muscle was a desperate act of clearing out the poisonous biological buildup that the body had worked so hard to expel while they slept. Once the tongue was aggressively stripped of this lingering poison, the true hidden danger of ignoring the practice became terrifyingly clear to early medical pioneers. They realized that skipping this single 30-second mechanical step would actively sabotage the entire gastrointestinal tract, turning the first meal of the day into a massive delivery system for concentrated bacterial waste. Consider the grim biological reality of waking up and immediately drinking a tall glass of water, or eating breakfast without clearing that heavy, toxic layer first. Every morning, swallow forces millions of expelled, decaying bacterial cells right back down the esophagus and into the stomach, effectively poisoning the lower digestive system all over again before the digestive acids can even fully wake up. It is a deeply unsettling loop where the lymphatic system spends 8 entire hours of the night pushing harmful elements up and out of the deep tissues, only for careless modern habits to wash them directly back into the vulnerable bloodstream. You are, quite literally, consuming your own discarded cellular garbage, setting the stage for chronic inflammation and digestive disease before the morning sun has even fully risen over the horizon. This daily reinfection creates a massive unnecessary burden on the primary filtering organs, particularly the liver and the kidneys, forcing them to work twice as hard just to survive the first few hours of the morning. Over decades, this relentless recycling of oral toxins slowly exhausts the immune system, leaving the body wide open to opportunistic infections that should have been easily defeated. To catch the microscopic debris that the copper scraper missed, these ancient observers devised another ingenious defense mechanism, a rigorous daily practice now known as oil pulling. By taking a full tablespoon of heavy warm sesame or coconut oil and slowly swishing it through the teeth for up to 20 minutes, they created an inescapable, lipid-based sticky trap for resilient microscopic threats. As the thick, viscous liquid moves forcefully through the dark, tight crevices of the mouth, Its fatty acids bind directly to the lipid membranes of dangerous hidden bacteria that water and simple brushing completely fail to dislodge. The heavy oil acts exactly like a biological magnet, drawing out the deep-seated toxins that cling stubbornly to the gum line and porous tongue tissues, locking them away inside the fluid to be safely spit out. With the hazardous plaque-building bacteria securely trapped and permanently discarded in the waste bin, the human mouth instantly transforms from a highly acidic breeding ground of illness into a fortified alkaline front line of defense. This simple lipid extraction protects the delicate salivary glands and ensures that the first barrier of the human immune system remains completely uncompromised throughout the entire day. There is a lingering, profound historical mystery in how these ancient thinkers knew thousands of years before the invention of microscopes or modern pathology labs that the mouth was the ultimate, undisputed gateway to total body health. Through relentless generational observation, they understood that decay in the teeth and bleeding in the gums was never just an isolated local problem, but rather a blaring, silent alarm bell signaling a much deeper, impending systemic collapse. Today, that ancient medical intuition has been proven right in the most chilling way possible, as modern cardiology now directly links aggressive oral bacteria to fatal heart disease and severe arterial blockages. The very same microscopic killers like Streptococcus mutans that breed unchecked on an unwashed tongue can travel straight through the bloodstream to the heart valves, turning a neglected morning routine into a literal matter of life and death. Knowing this fatal, scientifically validated connection turns the seemingly simple act of morning oral care into a desperate daily fight for survival against a highly mobile, unseen, microscopic enemy. Every time you clean your mouth, you are quite literally preventing rogue pathogens from migrating downward and establishing a deadly infection inside your most vital cardiovascular tissues. Yet if you look inside almost any modern bathroom cabinet today, you will find a very different, far more violent and ultimately destructive approach to this daily microscopic battle. Instead of gently drawing out the bad bacteria using natural lipids, modern consumers rely on the harsh, indiscriminate chemical destruction caused by alcohol-based commercial mouthwashes filled with synthetic dye. These potent synthetic liquids act exactly like a chemical burn, violently scorching the delicate mucosal tissues of the mouth and indiscriminately wiping out all the good, protective microbiome bacteria right along with the bad. It is a devastating scorched earth tactic that halts the natural production of nitric oxide, instantly raising blood pressure and destroying the essential biological shield that ancient Ayurvedic routines worked so carefully to build and maintain. Stripped entirely of this vital, invisible bacterial defense line, the human body is left completely exposed and highly vulnerable to the harsh, unforgiving realities of the outside world. Without a healthy oral microbiome to stand guard at the primary entry point, environmental toxins and aggressive airborne pathogens face absolutely no resistance when invading the respiratory and digestive tracts. To survive this constant, brutal environmental exposure, the ancients developed an intensive ritual of physical fortification called abhyanga, which involved vigorously rubbing heavy, warm, herb-infused oils over the entire surface of the body. This intense friction was never meant to be a relaxing, luxury spa treatment, but rather a vital, highly calculated daily medical process designed specifically for building impenetrable physical armor. By firmly working the thick, medicated oil deeply into the dermal layers, the underlying muscles, and the aching joints, they were literally sealing the human body against the chaotic, damaging, and drying forces of the harsh external environment. The skin, recognized immediately as the body's largest and most exposed organ, was treated exactly like a leather shield that desperately needed to be oiled, maintained, and strengthened every single morning to keep the internal nervous system completely safe from sudden collapse. Without this daily heavy layer of protective lipid armor, the physical form inevitably begins to crack, chafe, and dry out at a cellular level, leaving the fragile central nervous system totally vulnerable to sensory overload and the crushing weight of modern psychological stress. This loss of physical boundary allows anxiety and exhaustion to flood the body, proving that external maintenance is absolutely critical for internal survival. The warm, heavy sesame oil seeps beneath the surface of the skin, but its true target is not the muscle or the bone. It is hunting something much more elusive, a frantic, terrified energy that the ancient healers of the Karaka Samhita called the Vata dosha. This invisible force of air and space governs all biological movement, and when it spirals out of control, it traps itself deep within the nerve endings and the joints, vibrating with unspoken anxiety. The daily practice of rubbing this cured herbal oil into the flesh was a deliberate act to smother that internal panic before it could spread. Known as abhyanga, it provided a grounding physical weight, creating a lipid barrier that forced a chaotic, overstimulated nervous system back into a state of quiet submission before the day could even begin. By physically pressing calm into their own bodies through deep rhythmic friction, they generated therapeutic heat that dilated peripheral blood vessels and actively quieted the vagus nerve. They neutralized the erratic, involuntary tremors of stress at the cellular level, ensuring those microscopic vibrations could never escalate enough to shatter their psychological peace. Compare that ancient daily grounding mechanism to the cold, isolated reality of the modern era. Millions of people living in densely populated urban centers now wake up, move through their demanding schedules, and go to sleep without experiencing a single moment of meaningful physical contact or intentional tactile therapy to soothe their frayed nerves. This severe lack of touch is not just a passing sadness, but a profound physical starvation known as skin hunger, which leaves the human body locked in a permanent state of psychological distress. The skin, operating as our largest sensory organ with millions of hungry receptors, is left completely isolated, screaming in silence for a chemical connection that never comes. This daily tactile starvation breeds a deep, lingering emptiness that slowly unravels the mind, driving a chronic deficit of oxytocin while allowing corrosive stress hormones to flood the bloodstream unchecked. Without a physical mechanism to ground the nervous system, this modern isolation manifests as tangible medical crises, from clinical depression to severe autoimmune flare-ups. Only after this heavy grounding oil was thoroughly absorbed did the ancients step into the water for their morning bath, a ritualistic practice with a much darker and more urgent purpose than simply removing sweat. The water was not just meant to clean the superficial layers of the skin, but to shock the circulatory system into action. They understood that the water, often infused with potent astringents like neem and turmeric, was a tool to violently wash away the stagnant metabolic energy, the heavy lethargy of sleep, and the lingering unseen fears of the night. It was an intentional daily exorcism of the mind, scrubbing away the invisible grime of yesterday so that it could not poison the new dawn. Stepping out of the water meant leaving behind the heavy ghosts of the past, emerging completely bare and neurologically reborn. The sudden shift in core body temperature flushed the lymphatic system, forcing the blood to rush back to the vital organs and priming the central nervous system to face the incoming threats of a brutal ancient world. But a clean exterior surface means absolutely nothing if a toxic rot remains hidden deep inside the gut. The ancient sages knew that the internal organs, particularly the liver, spleen, and lower intestine, were like dark, damp sponges, quietly soaking up undigested food particles, environmental poisons, and raw emotional trauma day after day. This chilling realization regarding internal decay gave birth to the precise, deliberate physical manipulations we now recognize as yoga. By forcing the human frame into deep, unnatural twists and extreme abdominal bends, they were literally wringing out the visceral organs, physically squeezing the stagnant waste and trapped gases out of the body's most inaccessible hidden corners. This intense internal pressure temporarily cut off the venous blood supply to the digestive tract, forcing the darkest, most hidden poisons out into the open. When the posture was finally released, a massive surge of fresh, oxygenated blood rushed back into the tissues, flushing the dangerous metabolic byproducts toward the elimination channels where they could finally be expelled. Once the physical body was violently wrung out and purified, the focus shifted to the most vital, invisible thread of human existence, the breath. The ancient practitioners spent entire lifetimes mapping the exact, unseen flow of air moving in and out of the lungs, observing the diaphragm to discover a terrifying truth about human biological control. They proved that the mechanical rhythm of your breathing directly dictates the very reality of your conscious mind. By mastering the strict practice of pranayama, or breath control, they learned to manipulate their own heart rates, forcefully slowing down their internal biological clocks and pulling their minds out of the biochemical chaos of panic. Whoever controlled the depth and speed of the breath controlled the mind, turning an involuntary physiological reflex into a powerful, calculated weapon against anxiety. This mastery allowed them to face famine, disease, or sudden conflict with a chemically engineered baseline of unshakable neurological calm that modern medicine is only just beginning to understand. The ancients guarded this sacred morning silence with their lives, a stark and tragic contrast to the modern morning ritual that begins with the violent artificial glow of a smartphone screen. The exact second we open our eyes, we willingly invite the chaotic global news, the relentless demands of strangers, and the terrifying rush of the outside world straight into our defenseless minds. This toxic modern habit is a brutal hijacking of the brain before the prefrontal cortex has even had a chance to fully wake up. We surrender our fragile peace to a glowing rectangle, flooding our vulnerable nervous systems with a massive immediate spike of cortisol and adrenaline before our feet even touch the bedroom floor. This daily digital assault completely shatters the delicate biological calm of the morning, setting a frantic, fearful, and hypervigilant pace for the rest of the day. By abandoning the ancient laws of physical grounding, internal cleansing, and breath control, we guarantee our own long-term psychological exhaustion and guarantee a state of perpetual physiological burnout. The ancient practice of early morning meditation was never intended to be a gentle, relaxing escape from reality. Originating in the Indus Valley over 5,000 years ago, this daily ritual was engineered as a strict biological necessity. It functioned as a deliberate psychological fortification, designed by early physicians to build an impenetrable mental shield before the sensory chaos of the waking world could strike the nervous system. Sitting in absolute silence was not about emptying the mind for mere amusement, but about constructing a rigid, measurable defense against the relentless assault of daily stress and sensory overload. Those who documented the human condition in the Charaka Samhita thousands of years ago understood that a mind left unguarded during the critical dawn hours would quickly fall victim to the crushing physiological weight of cortisol spikes and daily survival. This calculated daily fortification prepared the human psyche to process the brutal realities of an unforgiving environment without completely shattering, by intentionally slowing the breath and lowering the resting heart rate before sunrise. These early practitioners effectively locked the brain into a state of parasympathetic dominance, ensuring that subsequent environmental threats would trigger calculated responses rather than blind, destructive panic. But the defense of the mind was only the first step in a much larger, unseen battle for biological survival, leading directly to the most critical and shocking truth of human health, the concept of Agni, or the core digestive fire. In the foundational Ayurvedic texts, digestion was never viewed merely as a mechanical process of breaking down matter, but as a volatile, burning metabolic engine that dictated the absolute fate of every cell in the physical body. Early Ayurvedic observers made a terrifying clinical connection, realizing that compromised digestion was the hidden root cause of almost all systemic human disease. They understood the unsettling fact that if this internal fire is allowed to weaken, a slow, unseen biological rot begins to spread through the deep tissues, literally turning everyday nourishment into a deadly, circulating poison that suffocates cellular respiration. The grim reality is that millions of people today are walking around with this vital metabolic flame barely flickering, completely unaware of the silent internal decay taking place beneath their skin. Modern gastroenterology now reports that over 60% of adults suffer from chronic digestive dysfunction, a direct consequence of ignoring these ancient metabolic laws, while their internal systems quietly suffocate under the weight of unprocessed waste. This brings us to the profound tragedy of modern consumption, where the fundamental act of eating has been stripped of its biological sanctity and reduced to a frantic, panicked chore. We now routinely force chemically processed food down our throats while staring at glowing computer screens or gripping a steering wheel in heavy, anxiety-inducing traffic, completely oblivious to the physiological lockdown occurring inside our own abdomens. Make no mistake, this modern habit inflicts profound, measurable physical harm on the human gastrointestinal system, When adrenaline floods the bloodstream, a stressed, scared body completely shuts down the digestive process by diverting blood flow away from the stomach and toward the skeletal muscles, effectively treating every hurried meal like a hostile bacterial threat rather than a source of vital, life-sustaining nourishment. The modern office desk has become a desolate, fluorescent-lit landscape where human health is quietly and brutally sacrificed to the relentless ticking of the corporate clock. By consuming meals in a state of constant email-induced hypervigilance, the average worker forces their gastrointestinal tract to operate in a state of paralysis, turning the simple act of eating lunch into a daily mechanism of self-inflicted metabolic injury. To stop this daily violence against the physical body, ancient practitioners laid out rigid, step-by-step rules for mindful eating that modern society has completely abandoned. Sitting down, chewing each bite 30 times to activate salivary enzymes, and eating in absolute silence were not polite cultural manners developed for high society, but rather highly calculated protocols designed to optimize nutrient extraction. They were strict, non-negotiable biological requirements engineered to keep the human immune system from attacking itself. When you eat in a state of absolute physical calm, you actively stimulate the vagus nerve, sending a direct electrical signal to your central nervous system that you're safe, which finally allows the digestive fire to burn cleanly, efficiently, and without triggering widespread inflammation or immune system panic. Ignoring these ancient laws forces the paralyzed digestive tract to swallow complex proteins and environmental toxins whole, setting a dark, irreversible stage for chronic illness and systemic decay. This modern negligence directly damages the intestinal lining, allowing undigested food particles to breach the gut barrier and flood the bloodstream, which initiates a cascade of autoimmune responses that can take decades to fully manifest. The mystery deepens significantly when we examine the precise timing these ancient routines demanded, specifically the strict Ayurvedic rule that the largest, most calorically dense meal of the day must be consumed exactly at solar noon. For centuries, this seemed like a mere cultural quirk, until the unsettling realization dawned that these ancient observers understood a massive, invisible truth about our physiological connection to the solar system. They recognized that the raw, burning electromagnetic energy of the midday sun directly drives human digestion through invisible, biological tethers. They actively linked the fire in the sky to the enzymatic fire in the stomach, understanding long before the invention of the microscope that human biology is inextricably chained to the violent, shifting rhythms of the cosmos and the precise rotation of the Earth. As the sun reaches its absolute peak in the sky, the digestive engine inside the human core simultaneously reaches its maximum unyielding power. Clinical measurements now confirm that the secretion of hydrochloric acid and pancreatic enzymes naturally spikes between 12 and 2 in the afternoon, perfectly mirroring the ancient claim that our internal furnace burns hottest when the solar radiation overhead is at its most intense. Today, modern scientific validation has finally caught up with this chilling ancient precision through the breakthrough discovery of circadian biology and internal organ clocks. Following the 2017 Nobel Prize awarded for the isolation of molecular clock genes, we now know that every single organ in the human body operates on its own strict, non-negotiable genetic schedule, completely independent of our modern schedules or late-night desires. When we ignore this ancient wisdom and choose to consume heavy meals late at night, we trigger a catastrophic, step-by-step metabolic failure. After sundown, the pancreas, the liver, and the intestines are essentially asleep, and forcing complex carbohydrates into a dormant system causes immediate insulin resistance, severe cellular confusion, and a rapid acceleration of the biological aging process as the body struggles to process the unwanted fuel. Forcing a sleeping liver to process a heavy midnight meal is a violent chemical disruption of the body's most sacred internal rhythm. Instead of utilizing the night hours to repair damaged DNA and flush out cellular debris, the exhausted organs are forced to store the late-night calories as visceral fat, quietly paving the way for obesity, diabetes, and a drastically shortened human lifespan. The glow of an open refrigerator at midnight is a familiar, almost comforting sight in millions of homes. We reach for that late-night snack or sit down for a delayed dinner at 11:30 p.m., entirely unaware of the biological chaos we are about to unleash. Clinical chronobiology reveals that eating during these late hours triggers massive insulin spikes when the pancreas is least prepared to handle them, fundamentally destabilizing the body. In the deep quiet of the night, the human digestive system is practically shut down, its internal fires banked and resting. Forcing cold, heavy food into a dormant stomach is like throwing wet logs onto dying embers, creating a toxic, smoldering wreckage inside the gut. Modern gastroenterology confirms that gastric emptying rates plummet by over 50% after dark, meaning that late meals simply rots in the digestive tract until dawn. This single modern habit of eating after dark quietly sabotages the body, leaving behind a heavy residue of undigested waste that poisons the next day. Ayurvedic physicians call this toxic byproduct ama, a sticky metabolic sludge that clogs cellular communication and triggers systemic inflammation. Researchers now link this exact mechanism of delayed digestion to skyrocketing rates of metabolic syndrome, chronic mourning, lethargy, and dangerously elevated resting heart rates. The ancient observers understood that a profound shift happens the moment the sun dips below the horizon. As daylight fades into twilight, an invisible ancient programming takes over the human body, signaling an absolute demand for a complete power down. Texts like the Charaka Samhita documented this transition thousands of years before scientists discovered the pineal gland and its crucial release of melatonin, the chemical messenger that orders the brain to sleep. Under this ancient biological directive, blood pressure naturally drops, the core temperature cools by 1 to 2 degrees Fahrenheit, and the mind is supposed to surrender its grip on the day's anxieties. To fight this twilight shift, to push through the gathering dark with artificial energy and bright overhead lighting, is to wage a losing war against our own biology. The parasympathetic nervous system tries to initiate rest, while our modern habits violently force it back into action. Ignoring this biological curfew forces the nervous system into a state of chronic alarm, stripping away our natural defenses. By overriding the natural sleep signals, we trigger a massive secondary release of cortisol, flooding the bloodstream with stress hormones at the exact hour they should be at their absolute lowest. This state of hyperarousal suppresses the immune system, leaving the body wide open to infection and accelerating cellular aging. To survive the harsh glare of modern life, the ancient texts of Dinacharya offer a very specific rescue manual for the evening hours. The process requires us to actively fake a sunset for our overstimulated brains by deliberately dimming the lights below 10 lux and turning away from the blue light of glowing screens. Practitioners prescribed grounding rituals like massaging warm sesame oil into the feet to physically draw energy away from a racing mind. It means stopping all heavy physical work, avoiding dense foods, and allowing the mind to detach from the relentless demands of the clock. By artificially recreating the slow, quiet descent of dusk, we trick our modern nervous systems into finally letting go of the day's terror. This deliberate sensory withdrawal lowers the heart rate, drops blood pressure, and signals the hypothalamus that the daily struggle for survival has safely concluded. This deliberate surrender in the evening is the only way to stop the mind from spinning out of control when the head finally hits the pillow. Neurologically, this winding down period forces the brain to shift from the rapid, anxious beta waves of the workday into the slower, more rhythmic alpha and theta waves required for sleep. Without establishing this critical runway, the brain simply cannot land safely in the realm of deep unconsciousness. Without that gentle descent into darkness, we face the sheer, agonizing torture of modern insomnia. Over 50 million adults lie trapped in silent bedrooms every single night, staring up at the ceiling while their hearts pound and their thoughts race in endless, terrifying circles. This condition is not a personal failure, but a severe physiological malfunction where the sympathetic nervous system refuses to relinquish control, keeping the body locked in a state of high alert. This nocturnal panic is the direct result of a broken rhythm, a brutal consequence of never signaling to the body that the hunt is over and it is finally safe to rest. The bedroom transforms from a sanctuary into a prison cell of anxiety, echoing with the ticking of a clock that brings no relief. The brain, flooded with artificial light and unresolved stress, interprets the dark room as a hostile environment filled with invisible predators. The terrible cost of this lost rhythm is a society walking through the daylight hours completely hollowed out by exhaustion. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention now classifies chronic sleep deprivation as a public health epidemic, directly responsible for thousands of fatal traffic accidents and billions of dollars in lost productivity every year. We are a population running on fumes, masking our profound biological fatigue with dangerous levels of caffeine and synthetic stimulants. The ancient practitioners did not view sleep merely as a block of empty, unconscious time. They understood it as an active, desperate fight for survival, a critical period of deep repair where the body works furiously to heal the damage inflicted during the day. Long before the invention of the microscope, Ayurvedic scholars identified the night as the exclusive window for the body to reconstruct torn muscle fibers, synthesize vital proteins, and consolidate fragmented memories. During these dark, quiet hours, the brain physically shrinks by up to 60% to allow cerebrospinal fluid to flush out toxic waste, while tissues mend and cellular debris is scrubbed from the system. This nightly cleansing cycle, now known as the glymphatic system, washes away amyloid beta proteins linked to Alzheimer's disease. If this cycle is cut short, the toxic buildup accelerates, slowly poisoning the mind and body from the inside out. Looking back at early Sanskrit medical records from the Indus Valley dating to 1500 BCE, we see healers prescribing specific sleep windows to cure severe mental anguish. They classified sleep, or nidra, as one of the three foundational pillars of life, proving that this deep repair cycle was recognized as a matter of life and death thousands of years ago. To them, chronic sleep loss was an early symptom of impending physiological collapse. But the mystery of human well-being deepens when we look beyond the daily clock to the shifting of the seasons, a practice known as Dinacharya. The ancients realized a profound truth that we have completely forgotten, which is that human beings are not machines built to operate at the exact same speed all year long. Our metabolic rates, hormone levels, and even our genetic expression change dramatically as the Earth orbits the Sun. We are forced to adapt as the Earth tilts and the weather turns brutal, yet we demand the same relentless productivity from ourselves in the dead of winter as we do in the bright warmth of summer. Winter naturally demands heavier, warming foods and longer periods of sleep to conserve energy, while summer requires lighter digestion and cooling herbs. This stubborn refusal to bend with nature breaks our spirits and shatters our immune systems. By ignoring the grim reality of changing seasons, we march blindly into illness, fighting an unwinnable war against the natural world. We see the casualties of this war in the massive annual spikes of seasonal affective disorder and the widespread collapse of community immunity every winter. The ancient Ayurvedic texts warned that attempting to conquer the seasons, rather than surrendering to their distinct biological rhythms, is the fastest route to premature death. The human body is not a closed loop untouched by the world outside its skin. When winter descends, locking the earth in frost and stripping the trees bare, our internal systems naturally seek to power down and conserve heat. Yet modern society demands we ignore this biological shift entirely. We force our bodies to process ice-cold smoothies and raw salads in the dead of winter, dumping freezing fuel into an engine desperately trying to stay warm. This biological defiance creates a silent, compounding crisis within our cells. Instead of resting during the darkest, coldest months of the year, we maintain a relentless pace, running at full speed under artificial fluorescent lights. The body, denied its natural hibernation phase, begins to fracture under the strain, burning through its deep reserves of energy and leaving the immune system hollowed out and defenseless. This unnatural persistence against the cold leaves a trail of exhausted, vulnerable populations in its wake. Look closely at your own daily routine as the calendar turns. When the sun sets hours earlier and the freezing wind howls against the glass, the expectation remains exactly the same as a bright summer morning. You wake up in pitch blackness, force yourself into the same commute, and demand the exact same output from a brain and body that are chemically begging for rest. There is no allowance for the changing of the light, no shift in the relentless schedule to accommodate the heavy, damp cold of the season. We treat our bodies like machines that run on a fixed, unchanging algorithm, stubbornly refusing to adapt to the shifting environment that ancient wisdom knew dictated our survival. This unyielding momentum ultimately shatters the delicate balance of our physical and mental health. It is a profound and unsettling truth to realize just how entirely severed we have become from the planet we live on. We exist in a state of dangerous isolation, sealed off from the natural rhythms that guided human evolution for thousands of years. The very elements that once dictated the flow of our lives are now treated as mere inconveniences to be engineered away. Our greatest technological triumphs have slowly become our most insidious traps. 24-hour lighting erases the healing darkness of night, while constant climate control tricks our skin into believing it is a perpetual, stagnant spring. We have built a comfortable, temperature-controlled cage that blinds us to the natural world, leaving our internal compass spinning wildly without a true north. Cut off from the Earth's natural cues, the human body begins to turn against itself in confusion. The tragic cost of this collective amnesia is visible in the sterile, crowded halls of modern medical centers. Waiting rooms are overflowing with people suffering from vague, persistent ailments, widespread inflammation, and immune systems that are constantly misfiring. We are living through an era defined by a crushing wave of mysterious chronic diseases that seem to have no single, easily identifiable cause. Beneath the complex diagnoses and the endless prescriptions lies a stark, foundational loss of daily rhythm. When millions of people live completely out of sync with the rising and setting of the sun and ignore the shifting of the seasons, the resulting biological chaos manifests as mass sickness. The ancient texts predicted this exact breakdown, warning that ignoring the natural order would invite decay into the very center of human life. The sheer volume of this modern suffering forces us to look backward for a way out of the crisis. The path out of this biological chaos does not require a complete withdrawal from modern society, but rather the reclamation of a single deliberate act. You begin to reverse the damage by anchoring your day with just one ancient practice, creating a small island of order in a sea of modern disruption. It starts with something as simple as standing outside to watch the sky lighten at dawn, letting the morning light reset your brain's primal clock. Or it begins at the bathroom sink, spending 30 seconds scraping the overnight buildup of toxins from the tongue before consuming anything else. This one quiet, intentional ritual acts as a wedge, prying apart the relentless rush of the morning and forcing a moment of profound physical awareness. By establishing just one non-negotiable connection to the ancient rhythm, the body slowly remembers how to heal itself. That single point of stability acts as a physical anchor, stopping the dangerous drift of the body's internal systems. There is a mysterious, almost contagious power that radiates from an individual who has finally aligned their internal rhythm with the world around them. When just one person begins to balance their life through these ancient daily practices, the frantic energy of their immediate environment begins to calm. Their grounded presence, forged in the quiet discipline of the morning, becomes a stabilizing force for their family, their workplace, and everyone who crosses their path. This ancient understanding of circadian alignment is now quietly reshaping the landscape of modern occupational health. Major research hospitals and progressive corporate policies are finally beginning to mandate natural light exposure and seasonal schedule adjustments, acknowledging that human biology cannot be outsmarted by industrial demands. The physical toll of ignoring these natural laws is written directly onto the bodies of modern workers. When the ancient system of daily balance is broken, the body becomes a quiet battleground where chronic exhaustion takes root. We see this aftermath in hospital waiting rooms and factory break rooms where millions of people are silently breaking down from diseases their ancestors never knew. Entire families are now carrying the heavy burden of a lifestyle that fights against human biology itself. This collapse of our natural rhythm triggered a massive shift in how the medical world views daily habits. In 2017, a team of researchers won a major prize for proving that our cells actually keep time, a discovery that forced scientists to admit the ancient observers were right all along. That finding sent a shockwave through modern clinics, changing the basic assumption that we can eat or sleep whenever we want without paying a price. The chilling reality is that our modern freedom to ignore the clock is exactly what is making us so sick. Yet as doctors comb through the endless data on sleep cycles and digestion, a haunting question remains stubbornly unanswered. Science can map the exact damage caused by a disrupted routine, but it cannot fully explain why our minds resist the very habits that heal us. Researchers can measure the rising stress hormones in a blood test, tracking the exact moment the body goes into crisis. But no lab result has ever solved the mystery of why modern humans willingly choose the chaos of late nights over the quiet safety of a natural rhythm. The long-term result of this disconnect is now cemented in public health policies around the globe. Major institutions have been forced to declare an epidemic of chronic sleep loss, treating our broken daily routines as a serious threat to human survival. This is no longer just a personal failing, but a cultural crisis that has reshaped how schools and workplaces operate. We are now spending billions of dollars trying to artificially fix the exact biological damage that a simple, ancient morning routine was designed to prevent. The true tragedy lies in the quiet, lonely moments of those suffering from this modern chaos. It is the deep, aching dread of a mother waking up exhausted, knowing her body has nothing left to give to her children. This is the invisible weight carried by millions who feel entirely disconnected from their own skin. They are trapped in a cycle of unnatural light and rushed meals, mourning a sense of peace they cannot even remember losing. This widespread suffering points to a much darker realization about how we have built our modern world. We did not just forget the ancient rules of daily care. We actively engineered a society that punishes anyone who tries to follow them. The aftershock of this shift is that true health has become an act of rebellion against the normal way of living. Stepping away from the screen to watch the sunset is now a radical choice in a world that demands our constant attention, looking out over a city at midnight, where millions of artificial lights burn against the darkness. A profound mystery lingers in the cold air. We have built these glowing monuments to human progress, but we still do not know if our ancient bodies can survive the world we created. The silent, empty streets hide the truth of a population turning in their beds, unable to find rest. History has yet to reveal if we will ever find a way to merge our high-speed lives with the slow, steady pulse of nature that our ancestors understood so perfectly. The permanent mark of this struggle is now visible in the very structure of modern medicine. Entire hospital wings and specialized clinics exist solely to manage the chronic inflammation and burnout caused by ignoring our natural clock. We have created a massive medical system dedicated to treating the symptoms of a broken lifestyle rather than fixing the routine itself. The lasting consequence is a society heavily medicated just to endure the unnatural pace of an ordinary day. And at the center of this sprawling medical machine is the everyday person, quietly paying the highest price. The loss of ancient daily wisdom has left an entire generation wandering through their own lives, feeling sick, tired, and deeply disconnected from the earth beneath their feet. The true cost of abandoning this ancient rhythm is no longer a philosophical debate, but a visible crisis filling the sterile waiting rooms of modern medical clinics. Millions of exhausted professionals now carry the physical scars of fighting their own biology, their bodies breaking down from chronic fatigue and quiet, internal failure. This mass disconnection has engineered a society where deep restorative rest is treated as a luxury rather than a biological mandate, leaving an entire generation running on artificial light and borrowed time. In the dead of night, a single digital screen illuminates a silent bedroom, its cold blue glare masking the steady ancient pulse of the earth just outside the window. It stands as a haunting reminder of the forgotten biological clock still ticking inside us all, waiting in the shadows for the moment we finally decide to listen.